Bouvet Island holds a record no one fought to claim, the most remote island on Earth. It sits at 54 degrees south, 3 degrees east, in the South Atlantic. The nearest land is Queen Maud Land, Antarctica, 1,600 kilometers away. The nearest inhabited place is even farther. The island itself is 49 square kilometers of glacier-covered volcanic rock. No harbor, no shelter, no trees, no fresh water that any vessel could easily reach. Storms come off the Southern Ocean without warning and without mercy. Norway claimed it as a territory in 1928. Almost no one had any reason to go there. In 1964, a South African science team made the crossing, part of the South African National Antarctic Program. Their mission was geological survey. They were not expecting to find anything left behind by another human being. They were wrong. The volcanic activity that periodically reshapes Bouvet Island had recently created a small lagoon near the island's edge, a temporary feature, enclosed, sheltered from the open sea. Inside that lagoon, the science team found a lifeboat. It was sitting in the gray water as if someone had simply left it there, oars still inside. A sealed barrel nearby. No markings on the hull, no registration number, no ship's name, no flag. A lifeboat on the most remote island on Earth, with nothing to identify where it had come from or who had been in it. No body, no personal effects, no note, no blood. No sign of a violent impact that would explain a shipwreck. The team searched the island. There was no one on Bouvet Island. There had been no one on Bouvet Island. The lifeboat had arrived without its passengers, or they had arrived and then left without their lifeboat. Neither explanation made sense. The South African team documented everything they found. The lifeboat's construction, they noted it appeared to be a standard maritime lifeboat, the kind carried on merchant or research vessels. The oars were intact, not broken or damaged in a way that suggested emergency use. The barrel was sealed. It had not been opened and emptied by survivors rationing supplies. Nothing had been consumed. Nothing had been written on the hull. If someone had rowed to Bouvet Island in this lifeboat, and they must have because there was no other way it could have arrived, they had left no record of the journey. No distress call had been received from the South Atlantic that season. No vessel had been reported overdue anywhere within rowing distance of Bouvet. The shipping lanes nearest to Bouvet are not near Bouvet. Vessels do not routinely pass within lifeboat rowing range of the island. For someone to have reached Bouvet in that lifeboat, a ship would have had to sink close enough that survivors could row, in sub-Antarctic conditions, to the remotest island on Earth. And then, those survivors would have had to disappear from it. South African authorities cross-referenced every maritime database available. No vessel of any flag had been reported missing in the southern South Atlantic in 1964. No distress signal from anywhere in the region. No crew listed as overdue. No insurance claim for a lost ship anywhere near Bouvet's coordinates. Alan Crawford documented the find in the Geographical Journal in 1965. The record was clear. A lifeboat had been found on Bouvet Island. Its origin was completely unknown. The lifeboat was real. The oars were real. The barrel was real. They had been placed there, or had arrived there by some means that left no trace in any official record anywhere. The investigation reached a wall, not because the evidence was insufficient, but because the evidence pointed to a ship that, as far as every registry in the world was concerned, did not exist. 2 years later, in 1966, a second expedition returned to Bouvet Island. The lagoon was gone. Volcanic activity, the same geological force that had created the temporary lagoon, had sealed it. New rock, new ice. The enclosed water feature where the lifeboat had been found no longer existed. The lifeboat was gone. The oars were gone. The barrel was gone. Not removed by investigators, not collected for further analysis, not transported to a laboratory or a museum, simply buried, covered by the island's ongoing geological reshaping. Every physical piece of evidence that a human being had once reached Bouvet Island had been erased, not by any human decision, but by the island itself. The photographs and Crawford's journal account remained. The documentation remained. But the objects themselves, the only things that could have been subjected to further forensic analysis, were gone. Who put the lifeboat there? The island absorbed the question, along with everything else. The most straightforward explanation: a vessel sank somewhere in the southern South Atlantic in 1964. Crew members reached Bouvet Island in the lifeboat, the most extraordinary feat of open ocean survival imaginable, and then died on the island before they could signal for help, with their bodies never found. But no ship was reported lost. No crew was reported missing. Not a single name attached to this lifeboat ever surfaced in any missing persons record from that year. The second explanation: someone was deliberately left on Bouvet Island. That explanation raises questions too dark to resolve with no evidence to examine. Both explanations are impossible. The lifeboat was there. On Bouvet Island, the lifeboat was real, and then the island swallowed it. Every piece of physical evidence erased before anyone could answer the first question. But not every maritime mystery disappears that cleanly. Sometimes the ocean holds evidence for decades, surfacing it on its own schedule, indifferent to anyone waiting for answers. In January 1906, off the coast of Vancouver Island, a passenger ship struck rock, and the evidence it left behind would outlast everyone who witnessed the disaster. The passenger steamship SS Valencia left San Francisco on January 20th, 1906, bound for Victoria, British Columbia. She carried 108 people, passengers and crew. Built in 1882, iron hulled, 1,598 gross tons. She had made this run before. The route up the Pacific coast to British Columbia was standard commercial shipping. The stretch of coast along Vancouver Island's western shore had another name among the mariners who knew it: the graveyard of the Pacific. Rocks just below the surface. Currents that set vessels toward shore without warning. Fog so thick that by the time a helmsman heard surf, it was already too late to turn. Dozens of ships had gone down along that coast before 1906. The Valencia was sailing into one of the most dangerous stretches of navigable water on the continent. It was supposed to be a 3-day run. The Valencia would reach her destination on the 3rd day, but it would not be Victoria. At approximately 11:30 on the night of January 22nd, the Valencia struck a reef near Pachina Point.
The impact was hard and immediate. Water flooded the forward compartments. The captain ordered distress rockets fired, arcs of light climbing into the fog and rain over an empty sea.
Lifeboats were launched. Several capsized the moment they hit the surf. The seas off Pachina Point that night were running so violently that a lifeboat launched from the Valencia's deck had almost no chance of surviving the distance to shore.
The ship settled onto the rocks with her stern still partially afloat. Survivors climbed the rigging, the highest points still above water. They held on.
The rockets had been seen. Help was coming. What would happen when help arrived would prove worse than being alone. The steamship Queen reached the area. So did the city of Topeka. They could see the Valencia clearly. They could see figures in the rigging, men, women, clinging to the masts as the surf broke over the hull below them. The rescuers could not cross the 200 meters separating them from the wreck. The seas were running too heavy. Any vessel that attempted to close that distance risked being driven onto the same rocks. The masters of the rescue ships made the calculation. Attempting a direct approach would likely destroy their vessels and add their own crews to the dead. They held position. They watched. People on the cliffs above Pachina Point could also see the Valencia. Some of those still in the rigging, if they could see anything through the spray and rain, may have been able to see the cliff tops. They could see rescue. Rescue could see them. One by one, through the night and into the following day, the figures in the rigging disappeared. 136 people died while rescue vessels held position offshore. 37 survived.
The Canadian Commission of Inquiry convened in 1906.
Its findings identified multiple failures: inadequate navigation, insufficient life-saving equipment on board, poor coordination between rescue vessels, delayed response from coastal authorities. The Commission recommended improved lighthouse placement along the BC coast and better standardized rescue protocols. Several of those recommendations took years, in some cases more than a decade to implement. The official record closed. 136 dead. Cause identified. Recommendations made. But the sea was not finished with the Valencia. In the months following the wreck, fishermen working the waters near Pachina Point began reporting something drifting in the area. A lifeboat drifting near the site of the wreck. Some of those who reported it described shapes visible inside, which the authorities logged as misidentification, grief, the human tendency to see figures in moving water. The reports persisted. The reports of a drifting lifeboat near the Valencia wreck site continued for months. Then, they stopped. 27 years passed. In 1933, a sea cave near the original wreck site was explored. Inside, in the still water at the cave's back, a lifeboat was found. It was almost completely intact. The wood had not rotted through. The metal fittings had corroded, but they were still identifiable. A lifeboat from a ship that sank in 1906 had survived inside that cave for 27 years in a condition that should not have been possible. The cave would have provided shelter from the open ocean. The water pooling inside was likely lower in salinity than the open sea, which would have slowed decomposition.
Tidal patterns could theoretically have drawn the lifeboat inside during the chaos of the wreck night and trapped it there.
Those explanations are plausible.
They do not fully account for 27 years of structural survival in a marine environment.
The lifeboat was recovered. It was confirmed to be from the Valencia.
No one who had been aboard that lifeboat when it entered the cave had survived to be found with it. The cave had kept the lifeboat. The ocean had not kept the people. The Valencia had gone down when some of the investigators who examined that 1933 lifeboat were children.
The cave theory holds up under scrutiny, to a point.
Protected from wave action, reduced salinity water, consistent temperature below the tidal line, these factors can dramatically extend the lifespan of wooden structures. Similar preservation has been documented in other submerged or semi-submerged cave environments.
But a lifeboat exposed to tidal fluctuation, salt air, marine organisms, and the mechanical stress of any movement over 27 years in any open marine environment would not typically survive in the condition this one was found.
The cave preserved what the sea should have taken.
There is no clean answer for why the Valencia's lifeboat lasted longer than the lifetimes of some of the people who searched for it.
In January 1906, rescue ships were close enough to hear voices from the Valencia's rigging. They could not cross 200 meters of surf. 136 people died within sight of help. 27 years later, the sea produced a lifeboat from that same disaster, intact, preserved, identifiable, as if the wreck had not finished giving back what it took. The ocean had held that lifeboat longer than most of the survivors of the Valencia lived after the disaster. It returned the evidence on its own timeline. Not when anyone needed it. Not when it could have changed anything. The Valencia's lifeboat waited 27 years before the ocean returned it. No explanation for how, and nothing left inside it to explain the night it entered that cave. In March 1973, the North Atlantic produced a different kind of contrast. 2 ships, identical design, the same storm. One left survivors behind. The other left almost nothing at all. In March 1973, the North Atlantic was running the kind of heavy weather that bulk carrier crews knew and worked through as a matter of routine. The Norwegian bulk carrier MV Anita was on a cargo crossing, a standard commercial voyage for a vessel of her class. She displaced approximately 21,500 deadweight tons. Her crew numbered 32, all experienced. All Norwegian maritime record showed as professional and competent. There was nothing in Anita's last recorded communication to suggest distress. No mechanical issue flagged. No deviation from planned route reported. Winter crossings in the North Atlantic were not gentle. They were not supposed to be. Bulk carriers of the Anita's class were built to handle exactly the conditions she was sailing through. The Anita had made crossings like this before. She would not make port on the other side of this one. And almost nothing of her would be found. The Norwegian Maritime Authority records confirm one detail with certainty. The MV Anita never sent a distress signal. No SOS, no Mayday, no partial transmission that cut off mid-sentence. Silence. Not the silence of a radio left switched off, but the silence of a crew that had no time to transmit. The window between the onset of whatever catastrophic failure struck the Anita and the end of any chance of communication was too short for anyone aboard to reach the radio. Or the radio was already gone before anyone could reach it. When the Anita failed to arrive at her destination, the silence was initially logged as a communications gap. Ships in heavy weather temporarily lost contact. That was normal. When the gap extended past any normal explanation, a search was launched across the northern Atlantic. Search aircraft and vessels covered the Anita's intended route and the surrounding ocean in the days that followed. What they found: one life buoy. Not a lifeboat. Not a section of hull. Not floating cargo. Not an oil slick spreading across the surface from ruptured tanks. Not a body. One life buoy. In seas where a 21,500-ton vessel had been sailing, in waters that carried heavy commercial traffic, in conditions that were severe but not unprecedented, a ship and 32 men left behind a single flotation ring. The lifebuoy may have floated free automatically when the ship went under, a standard mechanism designed to release at depth. It would mean that no one had time to grab it, carry it to a lifeboat, or use it in any active way. It floated to the surface on its own. 32 crew members did not. The Anita was gone, and that life buoy was the entire record of how she went. The same storm system that hit the MV Anita also struck another Norwegian bulk carrier in the same general area, the Norse Variant. The Norse Variant was of nearly identical design. Similar size, similar cargo, similar crew complement. Sailing in the same weather, in the same ocean, on the same night. The Norse Variant also went down. But the Norse Variant left survivors. Those survivors were pulled from the North Atlantic, hypothermic, in survival suits, clinging to whatever they had managed to reach when the ship went under. They were alive. They could speak. They described what had happened in the final minutes aboard the Norse Variant. The structural failure, the speed of the flooding, the chaos of trying to reach the lifeboats as the ship broke apart under extreme wave stress. Their testimony confirmed what investigators had suspected. Bulk carriers of that design and era were vulnerable to wave-induced structural failure in conditions like those of March 1973. The Norse Variant sank. Survivors testified. Cause established. The Anita sank. No survivors. One life buoy. No testimony. 2 vessels. Same design. Same ocean. Same night. Same storm. One left people behind to tell the story. The other left nothing that could speak. The Norwegian Maritime Authority investigated both sinkings. For the Norse Variant, the process was relatively straightforward. Survivor testimony, cross-referenced with structural analysis of the vessel's design, produced a clear finding: catastrophic structural failure under extreme wave loads, with flooding too rapid for the crew to fully respond. For the Anita, the investigation had almost nothing to work with. No wreck located. The ocean floor in that area of the North Atlantic runs deep. Deep enough that even if the Anita's hull had remained in one piece on the way down, finding it without a known last position was effectively impossible with 1973 technology. No survivor. No black box equivalent for merchant vessels of that era. No radio transmission capturing any moment of the disaster. The most probable cause, catastrophic structural failure, identical in nature to what sank the Norse Variant, was assumed but not confirmed. Therefore, the Anita's investigation closed with the word that offers no comfort to anyone: probable.
Not confirmed. Not explained. Probable.
2 ships, same design, same storm, same ocean.
Norse Variant. Survivors recovered. Testimony recorded. Structural failure confirmed. Cause established.
Anita. 1 life buoy, 32 dead, no confirmed cause, no testimony, no wreck. The design vulnerabilities that likely contributed to both sinkings led to new international standards for bulk carrier construction in the years that followed. The improvements came too late for the Anita's crew, as they always do. Why did the Norse Variant leave survivors, and the Anita leave almost nothing? The most likely answer: the Anita failed faster. So fast that automatic release mechanisms were the only thing that worked. That answer accounts for the life buoy. It does not account for 32 men. The Anita left 1 lifebuoy and 32 names on a missing persons list. No one on that ship had time to send a signal, reach a lifeboat, or leave any record of what happened in the final minutes. In August 2000, in the Barents Sea, a Russian nuclear submarine sank, and the situation was the exact opposite. Everyone knew precisely where the men were. The record of what was happening inside existed in real time. The outcome was the same. The Russian nuclear submarine Kursk was one of the most capable vessels in the post-Soviet fleet. Oscar II class, Project 949A, 154 meters long, 18,300 tons submerged, commissioned in 1994, armed with cruise missiles and torpedoes, designed to operate against NATO carrier battle groups. She carried a crew of 118. On August 12, 2000, the Kursk was in the Barents Sea for a major summer exercise, the largest Russian naval exercise since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Northern Fleet was demonstrating to itself and to the world that Russia's military capabilities had recovered from the turmoil of the 1990s. The Kursk had performed well the day before. August 12th was scheduled for torpedo firing drills, a routine evolution for a submarine crew of the Kursk's training level. The exercise was proceeding as planned. It was supposed to be a routine drill. At 11:28 in the morning, seismic monitoring stations registered an explosion. Stations in Norway recorded it. Stations in Alaska recorded it. Stations in Canada recorded it. The first explosion measured approximately 1.5 on the Richter scale, significant but not catastrophic in isolation. Then, exactly 135 seconds later, a second explosion. 3.5 on the Richter scale, the equivalent of 2 to 3 tons of TNT detonating simultaneously. The blast was detected as far away as Alaska and registered on instruments designed to monitor nuclear tests. The Kursk hit the seafloor of the Barents Sea at 108 meters depth. The second explosion had destroyed the forward torpedo compartment and the sections immediately behind it. Bulkheads collapsed. Equipment was torn from its mountings. Fire moved through the forward spaces in seconds. The bow of the submarine was obliterated.
On the surface, the Russian fleet's exercise commanders knew something had gone catastrophically wrong.
What they did not know, what no one on the surface knew yet, was how many men had survived the initial blasts.
The answer was 23.
The aft compartments of the Kursk held against the force of the explosions. Compartment 9, the stern emergency escape compartment, remained intact. 23 men had survived the blasts and made their way there. They sealed the watertight door behind them.
Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov was 26 years old.
In the darkness, total darkness, because the electrical system had failed, he took a notebook from his pocket and began to write. He recorded the time, 13:15, 1 hour and 47 minutes after the explosions. He listed the names of the men with him in Compartment 9, 23 names. He described the situation. They had attempted to activate the emergency escape airlock system. It was not functioning properly. The external pressure from 108 meters of water was preventing the hatch from operating as designed. He wrote that it was dark. He wrote that they were writing by touch. The last line of his note read, "I am writing blindly."
He dated the note. He timed it. That note, written in total darkness, 108 meters underwater, by a man who understood what it meant that the escape hatch would not open, is the most precise record of any moment in any of these 4 cases.
Kolesnikov had recorded exactly where 23 men were, exactly what their situation was, and exactly what time they were still alive.
The note would be found.
It would not be found in time. Russia's initial public response was to announce that the rescue operation was underway and proceeding normally. This was not accurate. Russian rescue submarines attempted to dock with the Kursk's escape hatch in the 48 hours following the sinking. They failed repeatedly. The official explanation was hatch damage and poor underwater visibility. Each failed attempt was reported to the public as part of an ongoing rescue effort. Norway offered to send its specialized deep-sea rescue team within hours of the sinking. Norwegian divers had the equipment and the expertise to attempt hatch access in conditions like those above the Kursk. Britain made a similar offer. Russia declined both.
For 4 days, 4 full days after the Kursk sank, Russia refused international assistance.
On August 21st, 9 days after the explosions, Norwegian divers finally reached the Kursk's escape hatch. They opened it in less than 1 hour. The aft compartment was flooded.
All 118 crew members were dead.
The Russian government had accepted foreign assistance 9 days after the disaster, and 4 days after it was first offered. The Norwegian divers opened in minutes what Russian equipment had failed to open for days. The official Russian investigation released its findings in 2002. Cause: a faulty weld in a practice torpedo of the type designated 6576A. The 6576A used highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide, HTP, as its propellant. HTP is extraordinarily reactive. A leak through an imperfect weld can cause spontaneous combustion when the fluid contacts metal components. The resulting fire and pressure buildup detonated the torpedo's fuel system. That was the first explosion, measuring 1.5 on the Richter scale.
The burning torpedo then detonated the other torpedoes stored in the forward magazine.
That was the second explosion, the one measured at 3.5. The 6576A design had been flagged as dangerous in previous incidents. The Russian Navy had continued using it. But the official investigation did not satisfy everyone. Some families and some independent investigators noted that the forensic detail Russia released was sufficient to support the torpedo failure conclusion, but not sufficient to close every question about the timeline of events in the aft compartment.
A competing theory that the Kursk had collided with a foreign submarine circulated for years. Western navies denied it, and no physical evidence of a collision was confirmed. The torpedo failure explanation is the most forensically supported conclusion available.
It does not answer the question Kolesnikov's note made unavoidable.
Kolesnikov's note was dated and timed at 13:15 on August 12th.
The explosions occurred at 11:28. The note proved that at least 23 men were alive in Compartment 9 1 hour and 47 minutes after the Kursk sank. Forensic analysis of the aft compartment after the submarine was raised in 2001 produced a secondary finding. A chemical reaction had occurred in the compartment. Seawater had entered and come into contact with lithium cartridges from the emergency oxygen regeneration system, causing a fire. That fire would have been unsurvivable. The question no official inquiry has definitively answered: when did that fire start?
Some forensic experts, analyzing the condition of the compartment and the materials recovered from it, estimated that the men in Compartment 9 may have survived for 6 to 8 hours after the explosions, possibly longer.
Norway's offer to assist was made within hours of the sinking.
Russia refused that offer for 4 days.
Norwegian divers opened the escape hatch in less than 1 hour once they were permitted to try.
Kolesnikov wrote his note at 13:15 on August 12th. Norway was permitted to attempt the hatch on August 21st.
The Russian government has maintained that all 118 crew members died in the first hours after the explosions.
Kolesnikov's note is timed. The refusal of Norwegian assistance is documented. The hatch opening time is on record.
What those three facts mean together, no inquiry has been permitted to fully establish.
4 cases. 4 different relationships between disaster and evidence. On Bouvet Island, a lifeboat appeared on the remotest piece of land on Earth, with no origin, no passengers, no registration, and no explanation. And then the island erased it before anyone could examine it further. The evidence existed for 2 years. The question has existed for 60.
Off Vancouver Island, 136 people died while rescue ships held position 200 meters away. A lifeboat from that disaster survived inside a sea cave for 27 years, longer than the investigation, longer than the Commission's recommendations, longer than the careers of every official who signed off on the inquiry. The ocean returned it when it chose to.
In the North Atlantic in March 1973, the MV Anita and the Norse Variant went down in the same storm. The Norse Variant left survivors. The Anita left 1 lifebuoy for 32 men, the minimum possible evidence that a ship had been there at all.
In the Barents Sea in August 2000, a man named Dmitry Kolesnikov wrote in total darkness at 13:15, listing the names of 23 survivors, noting the time, noting the conditions,
signing his own name at the bottom. The note was the most complete record of any of these 4 events.
Norway opened the hatch in under an hour.
They were given access 9 days after the Kursk went down.
Kolesnikov wrote his note on the first day.